I think we made the national news for corruption, and we've never really gotten to the bottom of it.
Debate and actually bouncing ideas off of people that do not agree with you is some of the most beneficial conversations I've ever had.
And I see this young girl is crying, and I said to her, what is wrong? She says, well, I'm the valedictorian of my class, and I am not able to take college-level classes.
People are tired of national politics being at the front and center of local government. And then when it comes to infrastructure, you can say all you want that you're focusing on it, but this winter proved that infrastructure and roads is not a priority.
I'm really excited to have you for a special episode of the Cincinnati Business Podcast. When I was thinking about the influences that influence most all businesses in the whole country, not even just Cincinnati, I think about government. So one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to get the candidates for Cincinnati mayor to have a chance to talk about their plans and how it will affect your business. So we invited all three candidates for Cincinnati mayor. And today with us, we have Brian Patrick Frank and Cory Bowman. Unfortunately, after several attempts to reach out, Mayor Aftab declined our invitation to be on the show, but we want to welcome him anytime if he would ever like to have a conversation with us. So how this episode works is that we have two back-to-back hour-long episodes in this one episode. First starting with Brian Patrick Frank and the second with Cory Bowman. The reason we did this is we didn't want to pit anyone against each other. This was a chance for each of them to have an hour-long conversation with me to talk about who they are as people, what they see as some policy changes that they could make if they were mayor, and how they may affect business owners like yourself. And a quick note from us here at the Cincinnati Podcast Studio. We do not live in the 52 neighborhoods of Cincinnati, so we are not eligible to vote. And thus, we try to be as impartial with these conversations as possible to allow them to speak for themselves. So I'm excited to get started. Let's take a listen to our first interview with Brian Patrick Frank. Welcome to the Cincinnati Business Podcast, where we give you practical tips and tricks to grow yourself and your business. And brought to you by the Cincinnati Podcast Studio. Well, hey, welcome Brian Patrick Frank to the studio. I'm glad to have you here on the Cincinnati Business Podcast. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Brian. A pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to talk to you because you have a very interesting history. You and I were talking off camera about a story that you guys took to East Germany as a kid.
Yes.
Your dad was trying to take you out there. But I'd just love to talk about who you are as a person, what brought you to the point that you are here today as running as a candidate for Cincinnati mayor. And I'd just love to kind of hear kind of the process. What has shaped you into the person that you are today?
Well, I do have an interesting background. I'm not from Cincinnati, so when people ask me what school I went to, if I told them I went to St. Joseph's Collegiate Institute, they'd say, well, where's that? It's a LaSallian school, part of the Christian Brothers. It's very similar to LaSalle on the west side of Cincinnati. And just for perspective, yesterday was Holy Saints Day for St. John Baptiste de LaSalle. So he's a very important educator in the Catholic faith. I went to private high school, got a full ROTC scholarship to the University of Rochester. I joined the Navy. After that, I became an ensign in the United States Navy, and I served overseas in the 7th Fleet. That's based in Yokosuka, Japan. So I spent 3 years roughly, because I had some training I had to do my first year as an ensign, but spent 3 years overseas on 2 ships and qualified as a surface warfare officer as well as an engineering officer. So I was qualified to both work under sort of the main deck, so to speak, down on the helm, down in the area where all the machinist mates were. And I also qualified to be a ship's operating officer and take command of the vessel, direct its where it was going, and all sorts of operations on top.
Wow. Okay. So that seems like a big responsibility to get only a couple years. Like you said, only a year as an ensign, and then you started moving into those other spaces?
Well, a year's training as an ensign. I was an ensign for 2 years.
Okay.
But the first year, I went to various specific training in engineering and also as a shipboard officer, so that when I got out to the fleet, they weren't going to be training me from the ground up. Since I hadn't gone to the Naval Academy, there was a lot of training that I needed to get about what is it like and what are your responsibilities as a naval officer. And that was a very exciting part of my life. I loved the Navy, but I decided after my 4-year obligation was over, I had already earned my Master's of Business Administration. So, as background, I had a 4-year scholarship to the University of Rochester, but I completed my undergraduate degree in 3 years, and I used the 4th year to earn an MBA. And I knew that I really wanted to go into business. So great that I'm on a business podcast here because I'm very much about business. And I knew I wanted to get back into business. So after I left the Navy, I was interviewed by Procter & Gamble on the West Coast, where I was discharged in San Francisco, Treasure Island.
Yeah.
And they asked me if I'd like to come to Cincinnati. And I said, well, I'd love to come to see P&G. I don't know anything about Cincinnati. I've never heard of the name before, to be honest. And lo and behold, they brought me here, but they offered me a position when I arrived and did the interviewing. And I accepted it on the spot.
Wow.
And immediately relocated all of my possessions that I had. I had accumulated 2 cars while I was in Asia. One was a Mercedes 1959 or 1960 Mercedes 4-door that I had purchased over there for just a few $100s, and they brought that over for me from Japan. And then I also bought a brand new Japanese-made car that they also shipped from Guam. So I was driving around Cincinnati with Guam license plates until I could get my Ohio license plate. And people would say, how do you have Guam license plates? And I was like, well, that's because I got it when I was in the Navy.
That's crazy. It's always like seeing like a Hawaii license plate somewhere around here. Like, how did that car get here?
Exactly.
That's great. Okay. So what year was that when you moved to Cincinnati?
1985.
1985. And you were brought on to P&G. And how long did you work for P&G?
I worked for 23 years with Procter & Gamble. I was basically given an offer I couldn't refuse, take 1 year's salary and leave by the end of the fiscal year. So I left in 2009. There was a very bad period of time for Procter & Gamble, a lot of downsizing. I think over 10,000 employees were let go by Procter & Gamble over a multi-year period of time.
Well, that was a financial crisis, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
So my boss's boss, who was a director level, was forced to retire before me. And then my boss, who was an associate director, was forced to retire. And then he said to me, Brian, they can't do any more cutting. Your job is safe. Unfortunately, what happened is I was then in charge of the North America, Latin America, IMS pet food business from a procurement standpoint. So I had plants across the United States and then down in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And lo and behold, that wasn't the end of it. They decided to merge the pet food business into the food business. And so I suddenly became part of, Pringles and all the other food product groups. And they went through another round of downsizing, and my job was eliminated. So fortunately, I landed on my feet. Within a few days of taking the offer from Procter & Gamble, they said, we'd like to have you come back and do a consulting engagement with us. So that gave me even more time to prepare for my next career. So I did work for several months with Procter & Gamble and learned about our pharmaceutical business. I was part of a team that helped divest P&G Pharmaceuticals to Warner Chilcott. And my job was to review all of the contracts that they had to make sure that they could be assigned to Warner Chilcott and they could use those contracts to operate the business. And that had to be done within a very short period of time, or it could have been delayed. It was a huge penalty if we didn't close the deal in time. So I was working not round the clock, but very aggressively to help make sure that all of those contracts were properly assigned and executed so that Warner Chilcott could take all responsibility for the pharmaceutical business. It was a big success.
Wow. That's a big role to take. So it's interesting as you're starting to look into the space of being mayor, you understand dealing with large budgets, big transactions, those sort of things because of your experience inside of P&G. So that it sounds like it's kind of helped you in a way to try and get ready for an opportunity like this.
Well, P&G was extremely instrumental because I was one of the few employees in procurement who was actually living in the city of Cincinnati. A lot of P&G employees don't live in the city. They live in the suburbs. And so several times the city of Cincinnati requested that P&G provide a procurement resource to the city to help them in various projects. And so lo and behold, I was the go-to person because I lived in Mount Adams. So I worked for several months on the outsourcing of street sweeping with the city of Cincinnati. Then they asked me to come back a few years later to do the outsourcing of the Duke Energy Center
Yeah.
I also had Pat DeWine over at Hamilton County Commission ask if I would come over and help Hamilton County with their procurement group. And then after that, I was asked to be on the jail task force. So when we were considering a countywide tax to expand the jail, I was asked to also serve on that task force. So I learned a lot about city government and also the county government. It was a great experience that you normally wouldn't get at Procter & Gamble.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. The amount of public service you got to do as a part of your job was pretty cool, actually. Like
Very cool.
You got paid to do that. That's fun. Imagine being told, I'm sorry, but you're out of options. There's nothing more that we can do to help you. That's what hundreds of people are told every day when mental health treatments fail them. But what if there's a reason that you're not responding to your medication? The Anderson Clinics are pioneers in the mental health field, and they're the only ones in Cincinnati to offer personalized TMS, a non-invasive, low-risk, FDA-approved individualized medical treatment using an EEG to target underperforming areas of the brain. In addition, they offer things like ketamine infusion, psychotherapy, and medication management. They would love to help you feel better faster. Check them out and see what they can do for you. Just call 513-321-1753 to book your consultation today. So there's new tariffs dropping, markets are spiraling, supply chains are scrambling, and business owners are bracing for impact. And if your strategy was built last quarter, today probably just broke it. SolvStat helps brands adapt fast with clarity, speed, and strategy built to thrive in uncertainty. You can't control politics, but you can control your marketing strategy. SolvStat, brand, marketing, creative. Visit solvstat.com. Now, okay, so you said you left P&G in 2009.
Yes.
So what have you done since then?
Well, I joined a pharmaceutical company and worked remotely, so to speak. I lived in Cincinnati, but I drove every week. So I got there on Sunday night and I left on Friday afternoon. I worked for a company called Boehringer Ingelheim Pharmaceuticals. It's the oldest family-owned business, pharmaceutical business in the world. It's owned by the Boehringer family, and it's based in Ingelheim, Germany. And I actually got to meet the current president of the company because he flew into town when this is up in Bedford, Ohio, very close to Cleveland. We had a serious situation there where the products that we were making, these are all sterile pharmaceuticals. So think of a vial. Inside the vial are crystals. A doctor or a nurse will inject into that vial sterile saline solution. They'll they'll shake it so that it goes back into solution, and then that drug is removed as a liquid and injected into a patient. So it's designed to go around all of the protections that your body has to prevent it from any sort of contaminants. So it goes directly into your bloodstream. Instead of being orally ingested or nasally ingested, it goes directly to the bloodstream. And what was happening is these drugs that we were making were suddenly injuring people, causing them to fall into disease, and I believe in some cases they died. These were patients who were on chemotherapy. And the FDA sent a warning letter to the business saying, you need to tell us why you're having so many fatalities, or I never saw the warning letter, but they said, there's a problem with your drugs. Investigate this, come back to us, and tell us within 90 days. And apparently, the regulatory group had never received a warning letter like this and didn't know how to respond. So they basically did nothing. So on the 90th day, the FDA showed up at the door and said, your failure to respond to this warning letter indicates that you're not acting in a professional manner, and we are going to take control of your entire operation. Whoa. And you will not produce anything in this plant unless we are supervising what you are doing and inspecting everything that you're doing. And when that happened, I'm new to pharmaceuticals. My boss came to me and he says, Brian, I know that you've been thinking about relocating, and we've made an offer for you to relocate to Cleveland, Bedford area. But he said, Brian, unless you're planning to work for another company, I don't think you should take that offer from us. I think you should think about going back to Cincinnati, staying there, because this business is going to be shut down. And it actually was. There were some products that were only made in the United States by that plant, and so they could not move all the production to other facilities. But within a 2-year period, that entire operation was completely shut down. The 2,000 people that had jobs there were all let go and were forced out. But fortunately, out of the blue, I got a call from Dr. Odell Owens. I'd never met Dr. Owens in my life, but I knew who he was because I had voted for him for county coroner.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, well, pleasure to meet you, Dr. Owens. This is on the phone. What can I do? And he says, well, I've been told by my fraternity brothers that you are the man I need to hire to run the purchasing and efficiency office at Cincinnati State Technical and Community College. And I'm like, wow, why me? And he says, I don't know, but let's find out because my fraternity brothers are trying to make sure I'm a success. So I want to talk to you about what you can do for me. So we met at Sugar and Spice a few days later on Reading
Love
Road.
that place.
Yeah, I love the one downtown that we've got now on Over the Rhine, I should say.
I love that one a lot.
But this was over on Reading Road, and he said, Brian, I'm very impressed with you. He says, if you'll come on board with me, I'm offering you a job. And as I was out of work, I said, I'd be happy to take it. And I spent 4 years with Dr. Owens at Cincinnati State Technical and Community College. Unfortunately, the Board of Trustees did not offer him a multi-year contract renewal when his contract expired. He was only offered a 1-year extension of his contract, and he said, if you don't offer me 3 years, I'm leaving. And so they said, well, take it or leave it. So he says, I'm going to leave. And so when he left, within a matter of hours, HR was knocking on my door, asked me to come meet with them, and basically said, your job has been eliminated because you're a political appointee, and when Dr. Owens has resigned, you're gone too. And I had no knowledge that I was going to be let go like that. So out of the blue, I'm out of a job. No reason other than the fact that I was an appointee, and I felt like saying, what about all the good things I've done for you? All the things that I helped you accomplish, like I helped build a new a new college campus up in Middletown, Ohio. I was there from the very beginning looking at potential locations and found the old Cincinnati Gas and Electric headquarters up there was vacant, had been vacant, but in good condition, and recommended that we purchase that building and convert it to classrooms, which is what we did. I also helped outsource the making of textbooks on our campus and worked in partnership with the University of Cincinnati to have them make the textbooks for us. And they did it at a fraction of the cost. And they were very efficient and effective. But then that freed up, 1,000+ square feet of property that I was using with all these printing machines to make textbooks and copier machines. We took that area and turned it into a for-profit center where we could teach classes in there. So we turned a cost center into a profit center. So
Love it.
That allowed us to both reduce our cost of textbooks, but it also allowed us to be more efficient and effective. So tuition didn't have to go up, which was the main goal that Governor Kasich wanted to achieve. He wanted to see that we were cognizant of the fact that students just can't keep accepting year after year tuition increases and can't keep accepting textbook costs going through the roof. So I felt like I was highly successful at the college and couldn't understand why they'd let me go. But unfortunately, that's politics, and I was out the door.
So when was that?
So that would have been roughly around 2012, 13.
Okay. So then you've done some other stuff since then.
Yeah.
And then what's the quick version of what happened between then and then you deciding, hey, maybe I should run for mayor?
Well, I did land a great job with Thermo Fisher Scientific, one of the oldest pharmaceutical plants here in Cincinnati, up in Reading, Ohio.
Yeah.
I was the head of procurement there, and I led that for several years until it was acquired by Thermo Fisher. It was actually, at the time I joined them, Patheon Pharmaceuticals. It was held by a venture capital firm. Thermo Fisher came in and bought it. Actually went onto the New York Stock Exchange. We were a publicly traded company for about 3 weeks, and then Thermo Fisher bought us. And when Thermo Fisher bought us, they merged their procurement headquarter operations to Pittsburgh. And I did not want to move and relocate to Pittsburgh. I'd come to really like Cincinnati, so I decided to move on to other opportunities. So I went into consulting for a brief period of time. And then I was asked by, sort of out of the blue, First Student was part of a company called First Group America. It was a conglomeration of 3 operating companies: First Student, First Transit, and Greyhound. So many people know Greyhound bus lines, but of course, Greyhound was their smallest, but because it's public facing, it's the most publicly well known. And so I worked with them and McKinsey Consulting. My job was interpret exactly what McKinsey was recommending that they do to divest these companies and then help implement them successfully, which is what I did. So I was with FGA, and then as it split up, I retained my job with First Student for several years, and I stayed there until I decided I wanted to retire, and I did that.
Okay.
And so then I said, "Oh, what next?
What next?"
And then I saw where the current mayor was going to be running unopposed in an election, and if someone didn't put their hat in the ring, it was going to be an election with no other contestant but the mayor. And I'm a big fan of democracy, and I don't want to see someone just automatically get the job. So I said, I'm going to pull the ballot petition so that I can get on the ballot because I want to make sure we've got democracy in Cincinnati. And I didn't really have an agenda. I wasn't trying to change anything. I wasn't finding any fault with the mayor at the time. I'm thinking, I just want to be a viable candidate. So since then, I'm now figuring out what is my agenda? What am I going to accomplish? What's different about what I would do than what the current mayor is doing? So it's not like I had it out for the mayor. It's really, I just wanted to make sure we maintain democracy.
Well, tell me about that. Let's get into the agenda a little bit. As you've been developing that messaging, what it is that you are standing for, what it is that you have for policy decisions and stuff like that. Walk me through a little bit about what is important to you.
Well, having lived in Cincinnati for 40 years and being from an outside perspective, I will tell you that I feel that Cincinnati is not the most welcoming city to strangers. And it's not just my opinion, it's the opinion of many of the people that I've worked with at Procter & Gamble. I worked for a lady there who was an associate director, African American, and she was quite honest with me. She said, Brian, I don't really feel like I'm welcome in Cincinnati, and I also feel like there's racism in Cincinnati. She said, when I would go to a restaurant, why is it that I would always get the piece of pie offered that had the broken crust? Or why was I often the last person to be served? She says, I just feel like this is a town that does have racial issues, and I just don't feel welcome here. But I felt blessed by the fact that I was part of Procter & Gamble, and we had our own networking. So I developed many friends at Procter & Gamble. I don't think I could have survived without my coworkers at Procter & Gamble. And that's the reason why I was successful and why I was able to stay here and be happy, for 40 years and not looking to move. But I know a lot of people who come here who don't have that support network like a Procter & Gamble. They do feel like they are not welcome here. And I know other executives, especially African Americans who've moved here, they've told me that it's been a challenge to feel embraced and welcomed in Cincinnati. And so I feel like part of my mission is to take that perspective that we do need to become a more welcoming city, and also respect the fact that I believe that, we're almost a majority African-American city, but yet the opportunities for African-Americans aren't really what they should be. I really feel, especially from an educational standpoint, most of our kids that are going to public schools, Cincinnati public schools, don't graduate with the skills they need to be job ready. They don't graduate with the math skills, the reading skills. We really have an issue here with making sure that our young people are prepared. And unfortunately, it really hurts hardest our African-American community. So that's something I know people will say, well, education is not part of the job of the city of Cincinnati, but there is a city in the state of Ohio where the mayor is responsible for appointing all of the members of the public school system, and that's Cleveland. I knew that because I was working up in Cleveland. I lived in Cincinnati, but I was working for over a year and a half up in Cleveland. And I was amazed at the fact that the mayor of Cleveland got permission from the state of Ohio to be responsible for appointing all of the board members of the public school system. So I've done some research on that, and the reason why they needed to have the governor and the assembly and the Senate approve that is because they're not a charter city. They are not as rigid in their organization as the city of Cincinnati. So we are blessed to be a charter city. And as a charter city, we could, in fact, have the mayor be responsible for appointing its own board for the public school system. Now, there would be some politics involved with that. We would need to get city council approved. We would need to make sure we had an amendment before the voters to say we want to change the charter to give the mayor that responsibility. But I'm pretty sure we don't need to go to the governor. We don't need to go to the elected officials in Columbus, but we would need to get the voters of Cincinnati to approve that change. And I know it would be a political issue, but I think it's worth a discussion because I really feel like our young people in Cincinnati are not well prepared for the 21st century.
I do know, as someone with young kids, that I have looked around at some of the ratings of some of the Cincinnati public school districts, and it has surprised me how low some of them have scored compared to some of the other institutions in Cincinnati. And so I see some definite value to what you're saying of trying to prepare our young people better for the workforce, especially as someone who is a business owner myself. Like, I would much rather have students come out of school a lot more ready to be able to enter the workforce than what you are saying they are right now. I think that is a fantastic goal to go after.
Well, and it's not just me saying that. So I was working at Cincinnati State for 4 years. One of the first things that I was shocked to see, I didn't realize this, but I actually was just touring the campus and going into various offices, and I come into this one meeting and I see this young girl is crying, and a young African-American woman, and I said, "What's the matter?" Excuse me.
It's okay.
And I said to her, "What is wrong?" She says, "Well, I'm the valedictorian of my class, and I am not able to take college-level classes. I'm going to be starting here, but in order to start, I've got to take all these remedial classes." And she was crying because as a valedictorian from her public high school, she thought, how can this possibly happen that I'm not qualified to take my entry-level college classes? And I have to spend at least 6 months, maybe a year, taking remedial courses. So that to me was a real eye-opener. I felt very sorry for her, but then I realized if this is happening to the valedictorian of one of our public schools, can you imagine what's happening to the students who aren't the number one person in their class?
Wow. So the big thing that you're talking about is looking at trying to restructure the way that the school board works here in Cincinnati.
Yes.
So how would you go about structuring it? If you were in charge of that, if you made the amendment as mayor and that happened, what changes would you make and how would you do it?
Well, I don't want to get the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
So this is just an idea that I've come up with in the past 3 months of preparing for office. I would really need to research this. I would need to get experts involved. I have found that even though I've got some great ideas, when I go out and try to talk to people about them, they're very reluctant to talk to me. Like, who are you, Brian? Maybe you're a candidate for mayor, but you're not really the likely candidate to get the job, so why should I talk to you? People who I thought were friends of mine who would give me advice don't want to go on the record. So I started looking at a variety of things where I want to be able to have a position. So I'll give you, for instance, one of the recommendations of the Futures Commission is that we lease the airport that we have, Lunken Field, to CVG and have CVG operate it for us, and they would pay us money to take over that. So what did I do? I reached out to a person who I thought would respond to me, who was in charge of the airport, and told her that I wanted to get her input and understand more about this recommendation, and she wouldn't even respond to me, would not respond to my request. And unfortunately, she's already left town, so she's no longer here in Cincinnati. She's been replaced as the CEO over there at the airport, and so I don't have an input on what I would do about the airport. So what am I going to do about the school system? I don't know, because can you imagine me trying to call up and speak to somebody currently at CPS and ask them what they would think about the mayor taking over the appointment of their position and not allowing them to run for public office, they would never want to talk to me. They'd want to stop that in the tracks. So I can't tell you what my plan would be until I actually sit down with some thought leaders, until I give the mayor a call up in Cleveland and ask the mayor up there, how has this worked for you? Is this really a success like it says it is in the paper? Because when it says what it says in the paper is that by changing the mayor taking over control, they not overnight, but within a year, saw the results of the student success criteria go up 20%.
Whoa.
So I'm thinking, if they can do that in a year, what could we do here? So I think it's something that needs to be pursued, but I will be honest with you, I don't know what the specifics would be. I would need to have people willing to talk to me, and I think that's going to take me being actually elected mayor before people will actually take me seriously enough to talk to me about these things.
Well, I can really appreciate that. The idea that it's an idea that you have and you're still looking for experts to try and weigh in on it. I think that's a very valuable thing. A lot of people think that when people run, and I think I've had this opinion myself, like when people run for office, they've got their whole plan laid out. They're going to do whatever they want to do despite other people's opinion. But I think it's a very healthy perspective to walk in saying, actually, this is just an idea. If people tell me it's a terrible idea, then let's figure out other ways to make our system better. So I think that's fantastic. Well done. I think that's a great open-handed way to walk into it, and just recognizing where your current position is as a candidate. I think that's great. So what other things are you noticing about Cincinnati that you're hoping to try and influence as mayor?
Well, I think we made the national news for corruption, and we've never really gotten to the bottom of it. We've had 3 city council members go to prison for corruption, and we actually had a bill passed in council where we were going to hire Crow, a consulting firm out of Chicago, who was going to investigate and figure out through a forensic audit of all of the legislation that had been passed for a 4-year period of time there. Was there corruption involved, or was there a pattern of corruption involved where developers were being preferentially treated to get deals from various council members or other elected officials, and including the mayor? So that has never happened. I mean, it did get passed that audit would be done, and then a preliminary report was sent in to the city manager, and the city manager basically said, well, this is not something that we can accept. We're not going to pursue this, and essentially it's been put on hold for several years. And it's like, so we have never gotten to the bottom of all the corruption that happened here. And we may now even go before the Supreme Court of the United States if P.G. Sittenfeld's case is accepted, and we'll be on national news again for corruption. And yet we still don't know the root causes. How bad was it? Was it only 3 who were corrupt? Did we get all the bad guys and girls or not? So I think we need to get to the bottom of that. Now, Sharon Coolidge did an outstanding article about 2 years ago about this, saying that this audit was mysteriously derailed. But since then, we've never heard anything about it. So I want to get to the bottom of why that forensic audit has not been completed.
Okay, so for those of us who may not be as informed around the corruption, like why were those 3 city council members indicted and put in jail? And what sort of information do we know right now around that?
Well, we know that the 3 people, so it was Tamaya Denard, it was Jeff Pastor, a Republican, and P.G. Sittenfeld. So P.G. was a Democrat. Tamaya Denard was his protege, worked in his office previously when he was on council. He was running for the mayor. And what we know is those 3 individuals were soliciting bribes and found guilty by peers that they were in fact guilty of a crime. And so those 3 people went to jail for corruption because they were expecting donations to their campaigns. Or in the case of Tamaya Denard, it wasn't to her campaign. She actually took money and went on a vacation to Florida, which is really bad. But we don't know all the details about was that the full extent of all of this corruption. We did have the FBI do these investigations for us, and that's not the way a city should run. We should not be dependent on the Federal Bureau of Investigation to keep our city clean. We ought to be knowing what's going on. We need to understand the legislation. And what really concerns me about the way the city is run is, did you know that 90% of the bills that are passed by council are done by emergency, which means on its first reading before city council, it's passed as law. And the law actually says if it's not an emergency, if this is not absolutely critical, there should be 3 readings at 3 city council meetings, which gives the public a chance to look into this and say, why are we doing this? Is this really necessary? What is this whole thing about? But when you do a first reading and then you pass it as an emergency, which is over 90% of the time, that's just wrong. It leads to corruption. It leads to all sorts of things that we don't know the reason why, because we don't give the public a chance to investigate these things. So I think there's still a lot that needs to be done with city council to clean this thing up. And the first thing I want to do is stop all these emergency ordinances. That is just very dangerous.
Now, here's a question for you. From my understanding, city council members are a publicly elected position. So what sort of influence would you as mayor have over the city council to be able to enact some of those changes?
Well, it's actually called the bully pulpit. So as mayor, I am viewed as the leader, public official for the city of Cincinnati. People will, in the media, the press, television, will listen to me. They will let me speak. I mean, assuming that I do this in a professional manner, assuming that I do this in a way that respects the elected officials that I'm imploring to do the right thing. But it's really a bully pulpit. I am not empowered to force the council to do things. The council has the right to vote on things the way they want to vote on things. But as mayor, I would use my position to try to influence and build a consensus of good governance. And I think there are many people on city council who are concerned about good governance, but you don't want to be that lone councilman out there speaking up and trying to do something when maybe others on council won't support you. But if the mayor is out there saying, this is what I believe, I want to encourage city council members to support this, and if you don't, let's hear your reason why. And so at least it elevates the conversation, and I'm a backstop. I'm there saying, this is my asking for your input, not you on your own coming up saying, I, as a council member, one of 9, that I want to make this change. It's me as the mayor giving these council members a chance to stand up and say, I think the mayor's bringing up a good point. Let's explore this further.
That's great. Yeah. So I think that is a strong place to be able to enact change. It makes sense. The mayor is the person in charge here in the city, so that makes sense. Hey, Cincinnati, are you tired of dating apps that just go nowhere? My friend Amanda Hood is a professional matchmaker and the founder of The Crush Confidential, the Midwest's only full-service relationship curation agency. So Amanda works directly with selective singles who are serious about finding lasting love with personalized matchmaking and elite coaching. She's helping Cincinnati's most eligible find real connections. No swiping, no settling. Visit thecrushconfidential.com and connect with Amanda today. Love is closer than you think. One of the biggest problems that you face when you're trying to create a podcast is the lack of time to make your podcast great. It takes hours of your time to plan, record, and edit, and then eventually post your content. Here at the Cincinnati Podcast Studio, we help brands and entrepreneurs build their own podcast with services from planning to posting. We've got you covered. So come to our studio located in downtown Cincinnati and let us help you plan your show, coach you on how to be a great host, record, edit, and post your show. If you're interested in starting your own show, check us out at CincinnatiPodcastStudio.com. Now, one of the things, obviously, our audience is more people in business in Cincinnati. So you named a couple of different policies there that you're looking to try and move towards. But how would you describe your mayoral candidacy? Like, how would it affect Cincinnati business owners and people in business from like economically, but also from a policy perspective, from a regulation standpoint, that sort of thing?
Well, just to reiterate a point I made earlier on, one of the most important factors for employers is to find good employees, qualified employees. And that's a real challenge these days is we don't have enough qualified workers to join a lot of these companies that want to expand and grow. So I would want to focus on making sure that we bring in more qualified teachers, training, and things like that, all the way up through public schools to make sure that we've got the workforce there that we need. And then also work with institutions like Cincinnati State Technical and Community College, because they've got a wonderful training program there where they will take the students who haven't really got the education that they need to be a success in business, and they can do co-op programs and get them trained up within a 2-year period of time to be able to enter the workforce. So I'd like to work closely with them. That's something that I saw happen when I was at Cincinnati State. Mayor John Cranley helped me and the city of and the college, I should say, start up a new program. So when I was at Cincinnati State, I led a DACOM, which is an educational term that means creating a new curriculum. And so I led a DACOM to create 2 new programs at Cincinnati State in the area of supply chain logistics, and it included procurement. So there are now 2 new programs that I helped start at Cincinnati State, one in the engineering school, one in the business school, and they were designed to create more a training pipeline for supply chain management, which is a big success. It's a very successful program at Cincinnati State. But there's more that I can do, and I think it really starts with the Economic Development Department at the City Hall. And I do know that they have a program there where they want to meet with existing employers, small businesses, and ask them, what can we do to help you expand and grow? And so one of my biggest successes that I achieved after leaving the business world at Procter & Gamble is when I was at Cincinnati State, I helped launch the Clifton Market. So Dr. Owens was asked by the Clifton community, what can you do to help us take this bankrupted company, the IGA, I think it was called Keller's IGA, what can you do to help us eliminate this food desert that we have and make this a profitable business and bring it back to life? So I was put on the board of directors for the Clifton Market, representing Cincinnati State because we had a vested interest. We were just 1.5 miles away. We also had the Midwest Culinary Institute, so we wanted to place programs and co-op students up there at the Clifton Market. And I was successful in helping Clifton raise several thousands of dollars to buy the building debt from the banks that had the debt. I think Fifth Third Bank was very helpful to us. They owned a majority of the debt, and we worked out a deal to buy that debt. We also had a $400,000 grant from City Council. Unfortunately, Mayor Cranley vetoed that, so we didn't get to keep that $400,000. Thank you, Mayor Cranley. But we did get a tax abatement, which was very helpful. So we had a 10-year tax abatement, and then we successfully launched, and that business is still in operation. So it was a co-op for several years. But one of the things that we learned is co-ops are a very difficult business model. There are very, very few successful co-ops. There are a few big insurance companies are co-ops, but in general, co-ops are not the best way to incorporate to be able to operate as a business. They're very slow to respond, and you need to get a lot of voters involved and to say this is the direction we want to go. So what I would say is the best thing we did after restarting that co-op and ending the food desert in Clifton was to sell it to a private owner. So the Singh family stepped up, husband and wife who had a lot of experience in operating quickie marts and things like that, fast foods and gas stations. So they came in and made an offer to buy the Clifton Market, and they've been operating it now, I think, for about 5 years, and they've been very successful. So I want to support small business. I have reached out to some of the former members of the board of trustees that I served with to see if I can't get some contacts with the Singh family. I don't have their direct contact information, but I wanted to ask them, since I've left the board and since they've been owned and owners of this business, has the city partnered with them to help them grow and expand or not? I tell you, as a grocery store privately held in the city of Cincinnati where Kroger is king, it's got to be a challenge to be in that business. So I'm still a shopper at Clifton Market, but I know I don't get any gas points. Whereas when I do shop at Kroger, I get my gas points, and I love that. So I want to find out, what is the city doing to help them grow and expand, because it's a tough market for a grocer that's not part of the Kroger or a large chain that's here in town. So that's one area, but I do want to get back to the fact that we've got this economic development department, and I want to make sure that that organization is fully empowered to go out and work with small business owners, help people who want to start up a business, get in business. And so I would very much want to be actively engaged with our economic development department to say, what can we do to help you be more successful?
That's great. I love that. I mean, do you have any specific initiatives that you would like to task that department, like that initiative?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because I've actually reached out to them, and I was told flat out, we can't talk to you until you do a full-blown study and come back to us with engineering drawings that will cost tens of thousands of dollars.
Whoa.
So this is not my idea, but it is an idea that I have taken from Neil Bortz, the owner of Town Properties, one of the most successful small businesses here in Cincinnati. About 50 years ago, Neil met with Disney Incorporated. He was out in Los Angeles with them, and he floated the idea of building an aerial tram from the downtown Cincinnati area up to Mount Adams, and to create a adult park in Cincinnati that would be both downtown as well as up in Mount Adams. And they came up with this plan. They drew up drawings. They came to the point where it almost got implemented. The challenge was for Disney is they needed to find 20 acres of land downtown, and they tried very hard to accumulate the 20 acres that they needed to be successful in the basin. They were unable to do that, so the project was sidelined, and it sat there with drawings already done, but never went forward. So fast forward, that was about 50 years ago. Fast forward, the idea was resurfaced. And about 10 years ago, as about a member of the Civic Association, I was looking at all the business opportunities that the Mount Adams community had come up with. And one of the ideas was a gondola, and bringing a gondola up from downtown as a way to keep our business district alive. And, so that was an idea that, again, before its time, it never happened. But I thought, now that I'm mayor, I might have the ability to make that happen once again. And there's a real business need in Mount Adams, because the St. Gregory, Hatch Street, Pavilion area has gone through a major downsizing. All of the bars that were very successful years up there, for the most part, have fallen on hard times and closed down.
I've heard that.
There's still a couple that are holding on up there, but, they're competing against the banks. They're competing against OTR in downtown. And
they're hard to get to.
They are hard to get to. And
Yeah.
I've been trying to work with the Hard Rock Casino, and they're interested in helping be the host where you could park your car at the casino, take the gondola ride up to the top of the hill, and explore Mount Adams without having to navigate all the one-way streets or find parking. Believe it or not, there's plenty of parking in Mount Adams, but to find it and to find where you're trying to go and navigate, that's the real challenge. So I have surfaced that idea to the Business Economic Development Group. I did speak to an engineer over there who was kind enough to give me a phone call back, and basically says, until you have drawings, until you have cost and feasibility, we won't talk to you. And that will take months and will cost thousands of dollars. I don't have that money, so I'm going to have to postpone doing that until I can actually get on city council, not on city council, but become mayor, and then take that idea further forward. But that's an idea that I have surfaced, but I was frustrated that they weren't able to help me. And, I'm not saying that I'm the only one that can't get this to happen. So again, this was before my time, but several years ago when we were looking at building the streetcar, some great minds over on the west side, the 8th Street Incline District, they went to city council with the same idea I had years ago and said, why can't we get a gondola that would take people from the downtown area over to 8th Street Incline? And they met with city council, and city council basically said, well, thank you very much, but we have no interest in doing that. We're more focused on the streetcar. So if you come back to us with a business plan and all the money that we need to do this, we'll look at giving you permission, but we're not going to be providing any of the funding. So, again, this idea of gondolas is not new. Now, what is new is Senator Bernie Moreno. Senator Bernie Moreno is the senator from Ohio, and he's a brilliant man. He was born in Colombia. He emigrated to the United States at the age of 5. And believe it or not, he still maintains strong contact with Colombia because he's got family down there. And if you are familiar with the city of Medellin, it's a big city down there in Colombia. They've got this huge gondola that is a mass transit system. It moves thousands of people, and it's very effective because it takes people up the hillsides. And in Medellin, it's part of the Andean mountains, and it's very difficult to get up and down their mountains.
Yeah.
But it's very successful. It is so successful that the people of Paris, France have decided to adopt this approach, and they are building a huge mass transit gondola from the southeast portion of their city up 23 kilometers to the city center of Paris. So, I mean, if there are people who are bright enough in Paris to make this happen, there's got to be people bright enough in Cincinnati to explore a test market of bringing a gondola to Mount Adams. And then if that makes sense, Senator Bernie Moreno's idea is, why not take this idea, test market it in Cincinnati, and expand it, because it's a fraction of the cost and it's a fraction of the time to build a gondola for mass transit movement than it is to build a subway or a tram. You can build it in about 40% of the time, and it's almost half the cost depending on how much construction is involved with whether or not you're doing a subway or a tram, a surface tram. So it's a brilliant technology that should be employed more broadly across the United States. And if Cincinnati can be the role model for taking that to the next step, I'd love to do that. And with Senator Bernie Moreno's support, I've got my fingers crossed that will happen.
Well, that is definitely a unique solution for the city as a whole, considering we are, unlike a lot of other cities, where we are nestled in the hills like we are. And so I think that is a really unique idea. And being someone who has spent time in Mount Adams and has seen some of the economic downturn, and I talked with some of the people who used to own some of the bars in the area, and they had mentioned how it's just tough up there now, competing with everything else that's down here, like OTR, where we are now, or the banks, or other groups like that. So I think it's a very interesting idea, and I see it as kind of exciting. Like, I feel like access to Mount Adams and even like the other areas that they have talked about it, like that is a really good idea to try and spread out some of that, give access to those spaces a little bit easier. So I think it's a wonderful idea.
And we need more tourist attractions in downtown Cincinnati if we're going to expand the use of the convention center, bring more visitors and tourism to Cincinnati. Right now, the number one tourist attraction in Cincinnati is Findlay Market. Beautiful market. We've got the streetcar. It takes people there. And that's the number one thing that most visitors to Cincinnati do. The second most important is the zoo. The Cincinnati Zoo is the number 2 destination for tourists in Cincinnati. And then number 3 is the Hall of Fame and the Reds. But, the Reds and the Hall of Fame are really only in business during the spring and summer months.
Yeah.
Unless we're, in the successful in a season and then continue into to the later term. But we need something year-round, and I'm thinking that this tourist attraction from the casino, which is really underutilized. We've got a beautiful casino, and I look at it from my house in Mount Adams, and I see all this empty parking down there, and it's like we aren't fully utilizing the casino. So I really thought that it'd be great if I could partner with the casino to help grow their business as well. They're a wonderful member of our business community. And it's a great form of entertainment, especially now with all of the betting that people are doing on sporting events and other things. It's growing leaps and bounds. And so, I'm not trying to tell people that they need to start gambling or go gaming, but it's a great place to have a meal. It's a great place to just get out and have a nice drink, entertainment. And if you are so inclined to place an occasional bet every once in a while on something, why not bet on the Bengals or bet on the Reds or something like that, and just feel like you're a part of something great in our city. A little bit is fine. I do a little bit, but I'm not a gambler, so to speak. But I love the casino. I think they're a wonderful neighbor to Mount Adams. I can take and walk down the street. There's a sidewalk that goes across the Interstate 71. The Court Street steps, and I go into the casino quite a bit just because I love the high energy that I feel when I go in there.
Yeah.
And so for people who want to come and park at the casino and then take a gondola up to Cincinnati, I'm calling it the aerial incline because I want to bring back the memory of the longest operating incline in Cincinnati was the Mount Adams incline. It wasn't the first, but it was the last, and it operated the longest. And so I think this might be our first aerial incline, but I would love to help the 8th Street Incline District also have an aerial incline, and maybe even take one up to UC. I'm very disappointed that, after we lost Santa Ono, the idea of bringing the streetcar up to, Pill Hill and the UC campus was, dead, and nothing happened with it. The current president did not take on the same championship role of working with the city to connect our two communities. Our two largest business centers, employment centers in the city, are Pill Hill, where all our hospitals and the UC campus are, and of course downtown is number one. But we're not really that well connected except by buses and people who drive. And I would love to see a better connection between those two.
That totally makes sense for me. My wife works up at UC and at UC Health, and I would love an easier way to be able to get up there to her. It feels like it's a bit of a trek to get between down here in OTR and up there. So I love that. Now we're running low on time here. So one of the last things I wanted to ask is, obviously you are by the nature of being on the ballot, you're running in opposition to the current mayor, Mayor Aftab, and I'm curious if there is any policies that he is currently running that you would like to change as the mayor when you became mayor.
Well, the mayor has done a pretty good job. I don't want to find fault with all the things that he's done, but I really take exception to all of these speed bumps that we have on our streets. It's supposed to calm traffic. It's supposed to slow down traffic and make it safer. And I think there is a place for these speed humps, probably near schools, near hospitals, that sort of thing. But on Colerain Avenue, I go up and down that all the way because I love Colerain. I have a church group that meets out in Colerain Township, so I'm on Colerain Avenue quite a bit. I don't feel like that is calming that street at all. I go up there and I can see your speed is, and the cars in front of me are doing 55 miles an hour, dodging these speed bumps. And I just feel like that is not a good investment of our money in those speed bumps because they're not having the desired impact. It's not slowing and calming traffic. And more importantly to me is it's damaging our plows. So we really had a bad winter this year. We got hit with some really bad snow. And a lot of our plows were damaged when they hit those speed bumps, and they damaged their hydraulics, and they were inoperable, and they were taken out of operation. And I said, why didn't you test this? Why didn't you see if those speed bumps would have an impact on plows? They never tested that, and they only learned it by having their machines break down, which is foolish. So I fault him for that. He implemented this strategy, and it was, in my mind, a failure. And this is something personal. It really only impacted a few neighborhoods, but I have lived in Mount Adams for 40 years, and I've always had my street plowed. I noticed that before this storm came up, they put all these barricades at the bottom of the hill and at the top of the hill. And I didn't know what this was all about, but what I came to find out is they had no intention of plowing the street. They were going to barricade the street and keep us all prisoners until it melted. And that's exactly what happened. So for 3 days, we just had barricades go up and snow, and I cleaned out my sidewalk, I cleaned out my driveway, and I couldn't get out because there's 3 feet of snow in the middle of the of Monastery Street. So again, I don't know if it's the mayor's fault, I don't know if it's the city manager's fault, but that was a debacle, and it was only because communities in Mount Adams, parts of Hyde Park, downtown, we were on national news with ABC World News Tonight with David Muir. I watch it every night. I think it's the best news broadcast out there. And I'm sitting at home and I'm watching Victor Oquendo report from Cincinnati. And at first it starts out with downtown and he shows how bad downtown is and how it's clogged. And then it goes to live and he's in my front yard and he's broadcasting from in front of my house. And I'm thinking, how did I make the national news? So I get up, I put on my winter clothes, I go outside, I see that he's broadcasting. I wait for his show to be over, and I walked up to him and I said, Victor, what are you doing here in Cincinnati? He says, well, you've made the national news. You can't deal with a snowfall. And it was an embarrassment. So we made a fool out of ourselves by not being prepared for that snowfall. And like I said, 40 years, this was not that outrageous a snowfall, but the strategy the city took was we're just going to barricade streets and not plow them. We'll let the snow melt. I mean, it was very foolish. And that's the one thing I would really fault the mayor with is how he's operated basic city services. And then since then, we've really done a very poor job of filling in the potholes. I know it's difficult to fill potholes and keep them on. But we did bring a third party in to help with that. But even still, I'm constantly running into potholes and damaging my vehicle because I'm going to these huge potholes that just can't seem to be fixed in this town. So
I had a friend that called me this morning and said, hey, I just had to turn around and go home because I just dented my wheel because I busted it on one of these potholes. So I do understand that one. That one would be nice to get fixed up fast. But I love it. So that's great. We're running out of time here. So the last thing I want to do is I want to give you a chance. This is kind of like the 1-2 minute version of your stump speech of sorts. Like give people kind of the pitch for you, how they can get involved if they want to get connected with you, and what they should do to try and help your candidacy going forward.
Well, to all the voters out there, I would very much appreciate you considering me as a serious candidate for mayor. I have not held elected office before, but I've got a lot of experience, both as a loaned executive from Procter & Gamble to the city and to the county, but also as a state employee working at Cincinnati State. I learned a lot about state government, and I've worked in partnership with the University of Cincinnati on outsourcing some of the services. So I think I bring a lot of experience, a lot of business experience that can't be undervalued, that you ought to think about what I could do different with a different set of eyes with my business background coming in and leading Cincinnati. And you will never have to worry about me taking a bribe, looking for handouts from developers. I am going to be as squeaky clean as can be. I am not going to go to prison after a very long and successful career at Procter & Gamble. You can count on me to be an honest, forward-thinking, outside the box thinker at times, but I'm not going to do anything that's wasteful or illegal. I'm going to be working in partnership with City Council, and I'm going to be a person that people can feel comfortable approaching. And I'm not going to be one of those people that's in the Republican Party right now that's sort of really out there, what you might call the MAGA Republicans. That's not me. I'm a conservative Republican. I have voted Republican consistently for president for 3 years, but I want to make sure people know that I'm a conservative and I'm not out there to be some sort of a fascist. A lot of people have run up to me and called me a fascist and things like that. That's not who I am. I'm a very conservative, pro-business Republican, and that's the way I will operate if I'm elected mayor. So thank you for your support.
That's great. And I did you a disservice. With that last question, I want to allow you a chance to say that one more time, but that is your camera. So you can talk directly to your people because I recognize you didn't realize what a good spot was to look. So feel free to say that one more time, talk it to that camera right there, and we'll capture that and put that into the edit.
Well, Cincinnati, I appreciate you considering me as a candidate for mayor. I know I've not held elected office in the past, but I have a lot of experience as a loan executive to the city of Cincinnati on 2 occasions, as a loan executive to Hamilton County Commission to help with their procurement organization, also working on various state activities with the Cincinnati state. I've worked with government. I've worked with the governor. So I've got a lot of connections in government that I think can be reapplied here in Cincinnati as the mayor. And I've got a lot of ideas. I want to be a conservative on council, but I want to have partnerships with all of the Democrats or independents who are elected and not just Republicans. I want to be a mayor for the entire city of Cincinnati, and I want to bring a business-minded focus to operating the city. And I ask for your support and I ask for your vote in the election in May the 6th. And hopefully I'll be there when it comes in November, and I'll come back and ask you for your vote in November for the final election. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Brian, Patrick, Frank, I really appreciate all the time that you spent with us today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been great, learning more about you, learning more about what your vision for Cincinnati is, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, Cory, so grateful that you were able to be here today. Thanks so much, and welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's start with the question that's on everyone's mind.
Okay.
You are, from what I understand, the half-brother of J.D. Vance.
Yes.
And so that was kind of the thing that took national media for a moment there when you started running for Cincinnati mayor. You told me a little bit of a story before we got on the air where we were talking about how you're like, hey guys, just heads up, I'm about to start this. Things are about to get a little bit crazy. Not as crazy as where JD is right now, but how's that been for you to be kind of labeled as JD Vance's brother?
Well, when we first made the announcement, I just knew that was going to be the label that was going to be placed on it. I think that it's a great tool to be able to kind of get exposure to what's going on in our city, exposure to the needs of our city. And so, hey, if that's what it needs to be used as, then that's great. I tell people that JD is an incredible role model of mine. He's an older brother. He first introduced me to classic rock music, and so I'm forever thankful to him for that. But also, he's got his own, not necessarily race to run, but he's got a lot on his plate right now. And whenever I first saw the inauguration in Washington, D.C., the first thing I thought was that what an impact that his life is making on the nation, and we can make an impact locally in our hometown. And so our heart has always been to impact downtown Cincinnati. We started a church, we started a downtown coffee shop in an area to where we want to see growth. We want to see businesses thrive in that area. And so this was just another realm to where, as me and my wife prayed about, we realized that this is a race for Cincinnati. This is a way that we can impact lives in the downtown area.
I love it. And I mean, it is really cool to see how involved you have been in Cincinnati with your church, with the coffee shop, which I'm bummed I haven't been to yet, but we're gonna make the trip at some point. Now. I mean, you're only a couple blocks away, so we should just.
Well, hey, what are you guys doing after this? We'll just drive right on over.
Oh, that sounds like fun. We might need to do that. Okay, we might need to do that. But so that has been an interesting kind of journey. Then to now you're trying to run as your own man. Is kind of the thing.
Yeah, and I'm not intimidated by the status of being J.D. Vance's brother. Obviously, that's a good thing. I think a lot of siblings and a lot of family members kind of feel like being in the shadow of people. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily worried about that. I'm actually very grateful to see what his life has done and to have that example to be able to say, hey, in your hometown of Cincinnati, you can make an impact as well.
Yeah. Well, so the other question I have around that is, what has kind of the online life been? Because of that national attention, it seems like I've seen some aggressive comments.
Well, that actually reminds me. Let me put Do Not Disturb on my phone right now. Typically, when I do any of these interviews, it's like my phone's buzzing like crazy, like an 80s beeper or something, But yeah, it's we saw firsthand whenever JD started running, kind of the feedback that you get from interesting characters online. Mm-hmm. And then, to be honest with you, we have a church downtown to where we believe certain things according to the Word of God. And in the world that we live in right now, if you are standing for something, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if you're standing on, I like Gold Star over Skyline. I like, Grater's ice cream over this or that. People are going to come out of the woodwork just to kind of gnaw at that, and to be able to participate in that kind of discourse sometimes is a little bit challenging, because you have to remind yourself you're not there to react, you're there to respond. There's a foundation in our life that we are meant to impact people's lives, that we are meant to bring hope, bring peace, whether it be with the Word of God, whether it be with common sense in business, whether it be with proposed policies in government. We are there to just bring some type of peace and hope. And a lot of times you just have to ignore all the backlash online and just say, no, this is what we're running.
That's good. That's good. Now, tell me about family. Tell me about I believe you are waiting on another kid to show up here soon, right?
Yeah. So we have our fourth on the way.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So thank you very much. We, this wasn't on our bingo card to have a fourth on the way, running for mayor and having a church and a coffee shop. But we have a rule in our household. It's God, family, and then whether it be ministry, business, whatever we pursue. And our logic behind that is that as long as I put God first in my life, I'll be the husband and the father that I need to be. If I'm being the Christian and the father and the husband that I need to be, well, that's going to allow me to be a better, whether it be pastor or business leader or even, in government. If you have that foundation, a lot of people fail to realize that that's actually what's going to allow you to do better in all the other areas. Some people think that they have to sacrifice their family, they have to sacrifice their relationship with God in order to pursue other things, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. I tell people that over the course of just my long political history of 3 months, I've talked with people, and many of them, they have marriages that are kind of in trouble. They have relationships with children that are kind of in trouble. Their health is declining. And I'm not saying everybody, and this isn't even bad talking those people, but you realize that over the course of this journey of political gain, many people have lose sight of the fact that if you walk away from it without your salvation or without a spiritual victory or without a family victory, then it's going to become a little bit less meaningful in your life.
So when looking at the job of mayor of Cincinnati, that's a big job that requires a lot of time.
Absolutely.
What are some of the things that you're thinking about to try and help keep yourself connected to your family throughout that process?
Yeah. So we, when we first announced, we had about 3 weeks to get 500 registered signatures in the city, which actually, is a lot harder than it sounds. You have to have people that get signatures that are registered in the city. They're the only ones that can get the signatures for you. And then you can only get signatures of people that are registered to vote in Cincinnati. You can't put just a national survey out and just get thousands of names to sign it. You actually have to do the groundwork. And so we knew going into it that we had 3 weeks to just hit the ground running. And so there was some times where it was 18, 20-hour days where I would get up, it would be pitch black outside. I'd get home, it was pitch black outside, and everybody'd be sleeping both times. We have a rule that no matter when I leave the house, I always have to hug and kiss my wife goodbye. And it doesn't matter how deep of a sleep that she's in, I have to do it. Otherwise, I will get a text saying, "What, you didn't hug and kiss me this morning." I know. So that's something that we kind of developed during those weeks. Well, then right after we got the signatures, I had a planned vacation for my kids we just went away for 3 days, hugged them, reminding them that dad still loves them. And then me and my wife really got together and started strategizing on how we would delegate our life, whether it be with business, whether it be with the church, whether it be with family life. Prayed about it, felt at peace about the decisions that we're making, and we hit the ground running ever since. We have our election on May 6th. More likely, I'm going to take a few days with my wife after the results of that, and my kids, hug them, remind them of everything. But the saying is you make time, right? And so whatever you make time for is what you're going to have time for. And in the realm of these politics, a lot of people think, well, you have to go, 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 go. Well, this is a business podcast. And so what I would remind anybody, even if you're running business, you have to learn what busy work is versus what productive work is. You have to learn that, because busy work, you never feel peace. You never feel like you're getting ahead. You always feel like you're playing catch up. Oh, go, go, go. And then there's people in the world that only operate in busy work. They actually haven't accomplished much in their life, but they're always busy doing something. You're like, dude, you're doing a lot. Why haven't you actually gotten farther ahead? But then the people that I look up to business-wise, ministry-wise, or even politics-wise, they tend to kind of sit back and strategize. The saying is that, if you have, I think it was, if I had 4 hours to chop a tree down, I would take 3 hours to sharpen my axe. And so in my mind, you have to take a step back. You have to prioritize your family, your peace, and then you're going to be able to do a lot more damage, and you're going to be able to do a lot more work that's productive if you take those moments to take a step back, regroup, get your thoughts in order, write down some things. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but I bullet journal, which is a strategy that has helped me out a lot. You got to dump all the things on the paper of what is occupying your mind, and then you got to prioritize.
Yeah. I just recently this month, so I'm about 30 days into it, of daily journaling, and it has been amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. It changes the way you look at your life.
Yeah.
And I was like,
and people in busy work don't like it because they're because they can't operate in peace, right?
Yeah.
People that are always on the go, 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 like they do not like that mentality because they cannot operate in peace.
Yeah.
But then you start realizing that the people that do the work of getting their thoughts in order, of getting the mindset right, then they're actually able to accomplish a lot more.
Absolutely. So when you're looking at accomplishing a whole lot more, what was the thing that kind of drew you in saying, hey, I think that this mayoral run is the thing I should be doing? Like what was your heart behind it when you started to come into that dream in a way?
Yeah. Well, up to the Friday before I announced, I had never really considered politics, to be honest with you. It was always this thought in the back of my head, because when you think about impacting a city or impacting people's lives, you're just sitting there thinking, what realms do I need to step into in order to accomplish that? That's why I tell people the Bible actually says that without a vision, people perish. And so I tell people a lot of times you're like an NPC, right? Non-playable character. You're just walking around without any purpose, without any strategy, without any vision for your life. And so you're always hooked on a career choice. You're always hooked on a position. You're always hooked on like what your Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 totals look like. But when you have that, what I call it is that it's your inward compass. No matter what, that compass is going to drive you to that vision and to that goal. And so when I think about politics and when I think about, that, for me, it just made sense that this was going to make an impact in people's lives. And so whenever I first had the conversations with it, the first thing that actually brought me to the race was the idea that Mayor Aftab was going to run unopposed. I had looked at the politics of the city, and I realized that it would have been predominantly Democrat on one side of these issues. And this isn't a Republican-Democrat issue. This is like, okay, when you have council members and a mayor that all, for the most part, agree on all these issues on one side of things, well, then that eliminates debate. That eliminates, progress in my mind, because debate and actually bouncing ideas off of people that do not agree with you is some of the most beneficial conversations I've ever had in business and ministry and all of that. Yeah. And so when I saw that Mayor Aftab was essentially going to run unopposed, I thought, no, I've got to put my head in the ring. But at the same time, whenever I thought that, I thought, well, this is the first thing on the docket is the mayor. And so if I can get signatures, if I can get 500 signatures by this time, then I know that we've started something properly. And then our goal should be to get educated and qualified people on council as well. And so I tell people, this isn't a lone, ranger race right here. Let's get past the primary, and then let's actually put together some strong people that know business-wise, that know infrastructure-wise, that know crime-wise, how we can impact this city. And then let's actually put some qualified people on the ticket. Now, that's not me saying that everybody is unqualified that's on council right now. There's some very good city council members that have a heart for the city right now on council. but it's more so just about a choice, giving people a choice. And that's been what we've been running on ever since.
So when you joined up and you said, let's give people a choice, obviously then the idea is creating what is your policy? What is the stuff that you are kind of running on?
Yeah.
So describe that to me. What is kind of the thing that you're looking to do that you may see missing right now?
Yeah, well, I tell people that with the church and the coffee shop, that we've had a front row seat to a lot of these policies that have failed communities. Now, whenever I was first watching all this, I didn't know the specifics of what policies were implemented that were doing this. I didn't know what was the decisions that government officials were making that was causing basically the suffering that I was seeing in our community. We're in the West End. And right now, the West End is at, I believe, 87% affordable housing, government subsidized housing. There's big issues with the streets and with crime and all sorts of stuff. And so I was just getting a front row seat to that for years. And then whenever I started researching it, because the first thing that we had to do was get 500 signatures to get on the ballot. Well, in the middle of that, I was asking people two questions. Number one, can I have your signature? And then two, what are the issues that you care about most? And then what I realized is that many people in the city, in the 52 neighborhoods of Cincinnati, all of them are dealing with very similar issues when it comes to this. So on our website, we have our 7 pillars of our policy, but really over the last few weeks, I've kind of gotten it down to 3. 3 big policies or 3 big issues that we're running on is proper money management, improving crime, and then infrastructure. And so crime, infrastructure, money management, those 3 simple things. Now, a lot of people say, well, you can say that, but what are the specific policies? We could be here for hours talking about it, but I will say this. No budget is perfect, right? What makes a budget proper is the foundational, principles that you do not spend more than you're getting in. And then 2, you need to have your priorities straight. And what I'm seeing in the budget and what I'm seeing with the money management of this city is that a lot of times we're treating the budget like an endless credit card. And we can't do that. I was on the debate stage and they were asking me, what do you feel about a new stadium? Or what do you feel about the underground tunnels? What can we do with the underground tunnels? I'm like, we can't fix the streets that are above the surface. Why do we need to expand something that's below the surface right now? I'm not saying that the future of Cincinnati doesn't hold these exciting things, but we've got to know where we are right now. We've got to have a balanced budget. We've got to be able to have a policy that doesn't keep on issuing bonds and issuing debt to the city. And we're digging ourselves more in a hole with the pension fund that's happening with the city retirement. And also, there's a lot of talk about raising taxes and about doing this, but that's just going to drive business out of the city. That's going to drive people out of the city even more. Property taxes, I know that that's a separate issue. A lot of times has to do with the state and with the county, but these are things that as a city that we can spearhead a revolution with it. We can actually say, no, as a city, we want to stand up for these things as well. And so proper money management, in my mind, takes up about 80% of these issues that are important to people. Because if you actually follow the money and you actually are good stewards of the money, well, then the future is going to look a lot brighter and you're going to be able to build on top of a solid foundation. And then when it comes to crime, there's a lot of statistics that are being manipulated right now that say that crime is down. You go into any room in Cincinnati of people and you say crime is down, you're going to get a big what? By whose standards? Nobody in the city believes that. I'm sorry. You can say it on the news all you want, but nobody believes it. Gunshots are up in the West End, and just because things might not be reported or things actually might not be properly logged, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. We're seeing major youth violence and youth gang stuff in the West End, and it's carrying into all the 52 neighborhoods. We're seeing there's policies that actually say that you're not allowed to pursue. There's non-pursuit policies or non-pursuit laws in our city to where policemen are not allowed to pursue people in traffic unless it's a major crime.
Oh.
And so you want to talk about gun violence, right? If a police officer sees that somebody is putting, let's say, 100 firearms in the trunk of their car and they drive off, that police officer cannot pursue them. because it's seen as, oh, we don't want, traffic pursuits happening in the downtown area. But you're tying the hands of our local police officers that want to see this crime like basically rid of in our city. And so a lot of people want to bad talk the police officers, but I look at the policies that are tying the hands of police officers. And there's not a lot of things that are supporting the police officers in our city. When I grew up, I saw CPD, and whenever we would come downtown for Reds games, it's like, this is like the NYPD, right? This is like this elite force, and I'm not talking about the issues that we've seen in the past of very racist things that have happened in certain issues. Those days, to be honest with you, we have to look past those days, because when you look at the Cincinnati Police Department of what it is today, the majority of them are people that are rooted in the city, that grew up in the city, and that have a heart for the people of this city. And it's time that we raise the morale of our police officers to show them that the city actually supports them and backs them up. And so those are things that are really going to help. And then when we talk about infrastructure, a lot of times people are talking about, why don't we see NCAA tournaments here? Why don't we see Super Bowls here? Why don't we see this? And I'll tell you this, that we don't have the capacity to take it on, because it'll be 1 p.m. on a Tuesday and traffic is backed up. What do you think is going to happen when major concerts or major events happen?
Yeah.
So, and also at the same time too, we've got streets that are basically flooded with potholes. And we want to focus on putting speed humps everywhere, but we have this joke around that you don't need speed humps in Cincinnati because you have potholes. And also, people aren't being reimbursed properly for the damage to their cars and their tires when it comes to this. So these are just things that, we want to talk about expanse. We want to talk about bringing, a film festival here. We want to bring all these things here. Well, you know what? Let's actually fix the problems that are facing our citizens every day, and not just bring events here that are going to get good news coverage for a weekend.
Yeah.
We want to improve the everyday lives of people, not just the weekend days of people.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. How did you find the last podcast that you listened to? Was it recommended by a friend? Did you see an ad for it? Or what about a short clip online that made you want to listen more? Here at the Cincinnati Podcast Studio, we help you produce your own podcast. And with your show, we create up to 8 clips per episode to help you reach your audience faster. These clips are short, engaging, and with catchy subtitles, because we know your audience is probably scrolling on their phone, muted on the toilet. If you've been wanting to start or upgrade your podcast, check us out at CincinnatiPodcastStudio.com. You've built a career, you've built the life, but where's the love? A super talented friend of mine, Amanda Hood, who is a professional matchmaker and founder of The Crush Confidential, personally guides successful, relationship-minded singles through a boutique, highly curated journey to find lasting love. No ghosting, no games, just real relationships, intentionally crafted. Based right here in the Midwest, Amanda is ready to help you write your love story. Just visit thecrushconfidential.com and schedule your confidential consultation today. Now, here's a question for you. I believe we have a big soccer tournament that's coming to Cincinnati here.
Yeah.
Is it 2026, I think that is happening?
I believe so,
yeah. So if you were elected mayor, would you have enough time to try and work on some of that infrastructure before that showed up?
Well, no, I think that right now we don't have the capacity to really do it properly, because we need better relationships with contracts and with, companies that are going to be able to do it properly. I spent a long time living in Tampa, Florida. And in Tampa, Florida, the city planners and the people that are planning the infrastructure there, right now, it's crazy because they implemented a lot of capacity for highways and for infrastructure that they had forecasted would last for decades, right? Right now, they are already at capacity of what they forecasted for 2030.
Oh.
So that's actually a good thing, though.
Yeah.
Because what happens is that they've implemented highways, they've implemented things, they've brought great conventions, they've brought great events to Tampa, Florida. The city is blowing up, and it's in a good way. But it's grown so much to where right now the city planners and everybody's looking at it, they're like, we're already at capacity for what we forecasted for 2030. And so, but that shows me two things. One, that if you actually have the capacity, that people are going to come, all right, and events are going to come. But two, if you have people that think properly on that, you're not forecasting for 2, 3, 4 years from now. You're forecasting for, I see the next 10 years of Cincinnati. And then the next 20 years and 30 years is going to be the greatest years of Cincinnati. We're a central hub to the tri-state area of Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio, right? We can actually replace Chicago as the epicenter of the Midwest. But right now, we cannot do it because we have to have proper infrastructure and crime figured out, and then money management in the city to be able to focus and prioritize our budget toward the right things for our citizens. So I see these events coming. And like you mentioned, the soccer tournament, do the things that are necessary to be able to have the proper capacity for it right now. But this is a long game to where the next 10 years needs to set us up for the next 30 years. That's how I see it.
Well, you said a really provocative thing there. You said you could see Cincinnati as being the next Chicago, like taking over Chicago as kind of.
Now, I mean that as far as business and as far as iconic structure and as far as bringing the success of our nation in the Midwest to Cincinnati.
What does that look like to you?
Yeah, because if you look at Chicago right now, there's a lot of things in decline right now because of these policies that are holding people back in the city. If you go to Chicago on a weekend, there's beautiful areas. It's a beautiful city.
Yeah.
But then when you go to the South Side, when you see the concentrated affordable housing, when you see the concentrated poverty that's happening, that's holding people in bondage, then you start seeing why there's certain things that are failing, the citizens of it. And a lot of people don't even want to go to Chicago anymore. They have the capacity, they have all the events, and I have nothing against Chicago. A lot of my friends are Cubs fans, and I don't really know any Bears fans, but besides that, but the thing is that, I see it as location-wise. We have the most potential of any city in America. I really believe that. We're on the river. We have some of the most iconic structures in the city. We have a historic aspect of this city. We have a broadcast history in this city. We have iconic food in this city. So when you look at us as a central hub of not only the tri-state area, but of the Midwest, I mean, you're 5 hours away from Chicago, 7 hours away from Milwaukee. This is talking about driving time. Talking about Knoxville, Nashville, St. Louis, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, all of them are within 5 to 8 hours of driving of this central hub. And so what I realize is that when you look at Cincinnati, I love Cincinnati for what it is, but I love even more for what it can be. Because Cincinnati has more potential to bring in industry, to bring in logistics, to bring in jobs, to bring in manufacturing, to bring in tech and innovation. I mean, if you look at what's happening at University of Cincinnati with even their blockchain sector and what's happening with that, I mean, there is so much potential. Cincinnati with the river, and I mean, this is kind of getting into even deeper stuff, but when you look at even the aspect of maybe even hydroelectric stuff that can go on in the river, you could actually be the epicenter of blockchain technology and mining in the Midwest. You could actually have this entire revolution of blockchain technology happening in the city. You could put all of the medical records of Cincinnati Children's and the amazing medical facilities that we have, you could put all those on smart contracts on blockchain. The real estate could blow up in the city if you put everything on the open ledger of it. And a lot of people don't like that because then it's public knowledge. But the technology of the world, when it comes to blockchain, when it comes to AI and all this stuff, Ohio can be at the forefront of it. I really believe it can be. I really believe that we can be at the forefront of some of the greatest digital revolutions that we've ever seen. And this is going to bring jobs. This is going to bring careers into the city. But we have to think from a business standpoint, not from an agenda standpoint, not from a government standpoint. We have to see it as our job as the government is to serve the needs of the people and then to open the doors for industry and for businesses to thrive in our city.
I love that. And I think that's totally true. Being a part of the business community here in Cincinnati, like we've noticed a huge uptick in, like there used to be this saying that like watch California and in about 5 or 10 years it'll hit Cincinnati. But I'm starting to see things where Cincinnati's now starting to lead the rest of the country. Like we have our I can't remember the name of it, like our AI for Humans group here in Cincinnati that are trying to help develop and bring more technology companies that are AI centric. Obviously you see with their blockchain stuff and their innovation hub that they have, like incredible.
Which I've got to schedule actually a tour of the facilities. One of my friends is trying to get me in with it because, I mean, from what I'm hearing, it's even bigger than what I thought it was.
It's massive.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And so I love that vision, and I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. Now, you're running, you first said you were running kind of, hey, let's have some sort of choice for mayor.
Yeah.
But now you're kind of in this space where you are kind of sitting as opposition to Mayor Aftab. That's kind of the space you're in. That's how this works.
Yeah.
So what do you believe that Cincinnati has been doing, or specifically Mayor Aftab has been doing, that you would like to change?
Yeah, I think that when we look at the policies and we look at the money management, it all has to deal with priorities. And, you know, it was Easter weekend on a Saturday, and there was a protest going on downtown that was bashing the federal government. Well, you better be careful, you know, how you kind of portray that, because we need that relationship, not only from a local standpoint, we need it with the state. We need, actually, all of these relationships are important in government. You can't just be a lone city, right? You have to have a proper relationship with the county. You have to have a proper relationship with the state levels, and then you have to have a proper relationship with the federal government. And I think that overall, people are tired of national politics being at the front and center of local government. Because when it comes down to it, we don't need a national figure to be the mayor of Cincinnati. We need somebody that recognizes that there are things that we need to fix in our city. And so, like, you know, I'll bring it up. I'm not afraid to bring it up, but a lot of people have asked me about the LGBTQ community. And what I tell people is that if you're a part of that community, you're still driving over potholes. You're still paying higher taxes than what you need to. You don't like these businesses closing down. You don't like these restaurants closing down just as much as the other person. I think that we have to find this point to where we realize that national politics, yes, it's a crazy world right now, but our city needs hope. Our city needs some things that the city government is not really keeping the citizens in the best interest of. And so when it comes to the mayor right now, first, I respect him as a father and a husband. You know, he is a husband, he is a father. I would like to think that he got into politics because he actually has a heart for people. You know, so this whole back and forth of we need to paint him as the devil and then I'm the savior, I'm not into that. All I'm here to say is that when people have a choice, I really believe that there's policies that we can implement that can be better than what we've seen the last 4 years. And the biggest things that I'm seeing is the priorities of the city need to be first over the priorities of a national agenda. You know, fix the streets, decrease crime. Don't manipulate statistics. Actually develop a relationship with the police department. That doesn't just mean the chief. That means the FOP, and that means that the actual officers that are doing the work. You know, we don't really have a significant role. Well, actually, no, I'll take that back. I believe that we can play a significant role in supporting our school systems. A lot of people just put that on the back burner because of the funding issue and because, you know, where it comes from with the state and everything. But Cincinnati Public Schools can be one of the greatest gems of Cincinnati. And the teachers that are in CPS right now, they work so hard. The faculty members and the maintenance crews and the janitors, custodial workers of the Cincinnati Public Schools, we need to actually, you know, be proactive in our support of these schools, and to be able to work with county and state to be able to implement systems that help these teachers out, and that they shouldn't be working under the fear of closing down. They shouldn't be working under the fear of, you know, their kids that they pour into every day need to find another school to go to because in a few months' time, we're just going to close this because of capacity. So these priorities, I think, need to take place. And then when it comes to infrastructure, you can say all you want that you're focusing on it, but this winter proved that infrastructure and roads is not a priority. It's not a priority in your administration. And so the Bible says, be a doer of the word, not just a hearer of the word. And so I think in the same way, our city government needs to realize that they cannot just be talkers of policy. They need to be doers of policy. They need to put their money where their mouth is. They actually need to support community councils, groups in the city that know the communities and know the struggles of the communities. We need to put them at the forefront of what we're listening to. And then through that, our policies need to reflect that.
I think that's great. I think you're noticing some pain points that people are really having, and I think those are all valuable topics that you're sharing on. And I'm curious then, like, this is the Cincinnati Business Podcast.
Yeah.
So like we talk business here. And so my curiosity is obviously balancing budget, spending money wiser will definitely help. Lower taxes will definitely help businesses. But what else are you thinking your administration would look like to try and help some of the businesses here in Cincinnati?
Well, I think there needs to be a buzz about Cincinnati. So our coffee shop, we decided to go with a baker that's in northern Kentucky, in Covington. I won't say her name because I would like to promote her, but at the same time, the craziness of online, they'll be like, oh yeah, no. But she's a great baker. She's in Covington, and when we first reached out to her, I said, where are you from? And she said, San Francisco. And I said, okay, so I'm from Cincinnati. So I'm like, okay, she obviously had family that was here. She was born here, whatever. And then she just moved back because that's the story of a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And I said, so where are you from originally? She said, no, I'm from that area. And I said, so why are you in Cincinnati? And she said, because it's going around that Cincinnati is a foodie city and that there is a culture of food that's happening in the city that we want to be a part of. And so that spoke volumes to me, is that showing that the food and the cuisine of Cincinnati can be a buzz about the food industry, is saying, hey, if you really want to succeed, you need to open up shop in Cincinnati. Well, guess what? A lot of these people that have come to downtown to partake in that culture are struggling right now because of policies that are driving people out of the city. People a lot of times don't even want to come downtown during certain days of the week because they're afraid of crime. Yeah, they'll come down for an event or for a major festival because they know that the police force is going to be there. They know that the crowds are going to be there, and so they're going to feel a little bit more safe. But when you talk about an everyday night in Cincinnati, a lot of people don't want to drive downtown. And that's hurting our businesses. There's local restaurants that have had multiple, locations, and now they're closing in the city because they're struggling to make ends meet on it. And so what I would say is that more than anything, let's create this buzz about Cincinnati that we are open for business. What can we do to bring businesses in, but also what can we do from a policy standpoint that's going to make sure that our streets are safe, that our potholes are filled, and that people, when they drive downtown to get a bite to eat, when they get a cup of coffee, when they come for a concert, these businesses are going to be able to thrive knowing that people are flocking to the downtown area on a daily basis. And so first and foremost, you have to set that tone. You have to set that culture. There's a lot about a mayoral position that's ceremonial, but it can speak volumes when you're setting the tone for the rest of the city that Cincinnati's open for business. If you are a business that wants to thrive in Cincinnati, come. We're going to provide a way for you to thrive in Cincinnati. And that's not just from retail and food. That needs to come from manufacturing as well. We need to have car factories there's so much industrial space in the city that there needs to be factories that need to be opening up in the city that provide jobs for the entirety of the entire West End or the entire East End or the entire downtown area. So we need to open up shop when it comes to that. We don't need to villainize businesses. We don't need to, it's crazy. If you're a business in the city and you actually succeed, you feel guilty for it because you have to pay more. You have to pay more rent. You have to pay more, taxes. You have to pay more fees to be able to do this. If you're kind of flying under the radar and you're not successful, then you're able to kind of make ends meet. But the moment you start actually thriving, then the fees start doubling up or the taxes start getting increased. Or now the rent wants to go higher because your landlord knows that you're doing good and stuff. So that's what ends up happening in lots of businesses in our city, and we need to discourage that.
When it's time to sell, they don't buy your hustle, they buy your brand. SolvStat helps business owners build real brand equity, so when opportunity knocks, you're ready. Don't wait until you're exiting to build something that's worth buying. SolvStat. Brand, marketing, creative. Visit solvstat.com. Imagine being told, I'm sorry, but you're out of options. There's nothing more that we can do to help you. That's what hundreds of people are told every day when mental health treatments fail them. But what if there's a reason that you're not responding to your medication? The Anderson Clinics are pioneers in the mental health field, and they're the only ones in Cincinnati to offer personalized TMS, a non-invasive, low-risk, FDA-approved individualized medical treatment using an EEG to target underperforming areas of the brain. In addition, they offer things like ketamine infusion, psychotherapy, and medication management. They would love to help you feel better faster. Check them out and see what they can do for you. Just call 513-321-1753 to book your consultation today. Well, that was an interesting thing you mentioned about rent too, is one of the things I've noticed. It's going on in all the cities around the US right now, but there's a major occupancy issue inside of commercial spaces.
Yeah.
And what I'm encouraged by is the policies that you are specifically talking about, I think will help fill a lot of those occupancy issues.
Yeah.
Now, I know a lot of it was COVID and people learning how to do remote work instead of having to be in an office together and that sort of stuff. But we have big buildings here in Cincinnati with massive amounts of space.
We have the potential.
Yeah.
We have the potential. Like I said, I love Cincinnati for what it is, but I also love it because of what it can be. And when you look at the historic storefronts, the exposed brick buildings, the incredible architecture of our city, we don't need to be demolishing these and have big-time developers taking away the character of our city. We need to enforce these. These areas need to be open for business to the top businesses in the tri-state area to come, or even in the nation to come.
Absolutely. That's why we love our landlords here, because they're building another space right across the street from us, and they're preserving all these really old buildings and trying to keep that architectural look that we have that most cities have demolished by now.
Absolutely.
And that is it is a massive rarity. I actually learned this the other day. Historically speaking, we're one of the last strongholds of, I would butcher the name of what the type of architecture is, but of that kind of late 1800s architecture.
Yeah, there's a lot of Art Deco in the city as well.
Exactly.
When you go to the, I believe the Netherland Plaza, and when you go into Crew Tower and everything, a lot of people don't even realize the beauty that's in some of these buildings. It's insane. So that actually needs to be at the forefront of our marketing as well for the city.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's great that we as a city are valuing keeping that character.
Yeah.
I think that is awesome. And so that's really encouraging to hear from my perspective. But also I know that the other side of the coin, where it's like, let's bring in large companies, let's bring in lots of jobs, let's bring in manufacturing, that sort of thing. But also, what are you thinking for the small business? Because the small business is usually the person who lives in the area, who is trying to start something from scratch. And they're the entrepreneurs, they're the bakers, they're the small family restaurants. How do you look at them a little bit differently?
I think that one of the biggest things that you're seeing, especially in communities like the West End, is that there's this major disparity between extremely low income and versus extremely high income. And to encourage that middle ground, to encourage that pathway out of low income, because our goal, if we have programs in place or we have subsidies in place that are assisting people that are in lower income areas, the goal should be to have these policies help them out of these communities, not out of the communities, but out of that financial situation. In the West End, there's a very rare occurrence of people that are in that middle ground. My coffee shop is actually one of them. To where at our coffee shop, we pay a fair market rate, rent for the area. And then there's 5 units over top of us that young people in the city live in, and that they work in the city, and that it's a great culture. It's a great community. There needs to be more of that. And so I think that when you talk about small businesses, a lot of small businesses, they only have the ability to occupy one space at a time. They only have the ability to reach one community or one niche customer at a time. And so when it comes to that, a lot of them, they base their income a lot on that middle ground, on those people that are somewhere in between the low income and the high income. And so with the policies that are in place, we have people that are helped out, but then we have people that, are extremely high income that can afford to be in these downtown areas, but nothing in between. And so that's what we need to encourage. A lot of times we talk about a housing crisis that's happening in our city. When you drive around the West End, there are hundreds and thousands of empty buildings and empty spaces that are actually already zoned for residential. But it's through these policies to where we have to choke out investors. And I'm not talking about big time investors. I'm talking about like people that can only flip 1 or 2 properties at a time. It is a terrible, terrible process to be able to try to go from an empty building to try to get the zoning and permits properly to be able to get it to where it is a thriving building that you can put a business in and that you can put residents in. And so the building that's across the street from my coffee shop, this is a perfect example. The building right there, and it's not necessarily owned by the city, but there's organizations that, are basically in cahoots with the city. And it's not, bad for a business to kind of have a relationship with the city, but we've got to realize that we're here to impact the community first. Right. So the building that's across the street from us, the investor, I believe he told me that he put $1.2 million so far into this building. And he wasn't even able to break ground on the construction on it because it was all about, purchasing, getting the zoning in place, trying to figure out the permitting, trying to figure out, whether they need to put affordable housing in, which we're at 87% affordable housing right now, whether they can put a nonprofit or a retail or a customer or what we can get it zoned for. The city should be actually making that process so much easier for small businesses to where right now, I believe it's just over 2.5 years later, and they're just now breaking ground on this building across the street from my coffee shop.
Wow.
The construction could have been done in 6 months. A business could have been thriving there, a restaurant or, retail, the units to be able to house people in this housing crisis that we're in. It could have been done so much quicker. But because of those policies that I was seeing for years, just having that front row seat in my coffee shop, I realized we're not making this easy on people. We've got to actually open the doors for business in our city. If somebody wants to come in, like look at this space that you have here, right? There's so many buildings that have character in this city that resemble this, that you could put a business and multiple units, apartments, condos, whatever it is. And young people and old can come, live, thrive. Businesses can come, pay very fair rate on rent. But it's because of the policies, because of the permitting, because of the zoning, because of certain organizations that are connected with the city. All of a sudden, it just makes it so much harder to where people can't get a leg up. And that middle ground of businesses, small businesses, and middle ground of income families and communities is depleted in our city because we're either only high income, only high visibility businesses are able to thrive in our city, or people that are just basically dependent on government funding rather than actual customers coming in. And we have to bridge that gap.
Man, I love that. So then I want to go back to a little bit more of a personal note then. What made you say, I want to become a pastor, and why the West End?
So, growing up in the area, I always felt that downtown was going to be my home. We grew up in Hamilton, Ohio area. My father was a custom home builder. And so we were always back and forth between this Ohio River Valley that you call it. We were always back and forth between this and Florida. Just because whenever the market was good in Florida for custom home building, whenever the housing market hit, then we're back here for remodels and other stuff like that. But there was never a point where I didn't feel like Cincinnati wasn't my home. Coming downtown and seeing Barry Larkin for the first time play and going to Bengals games and all this stuff like this, going to restaurants downtown, it was just like we felt always that there was a connection here. I graduated with economics in Miami of Ohio University. And I was on track to be able to work into banking and stocks, annuities, all that stuff. But then something happened. I realized that I wasn't on a path that had any purpose. I was just pursuing like a career. And there was no purpose connected to it. And so I had an encounter with God to where I just basically made a decision for the first time in my life that instead of pursuing what I want to pursue whatever his plan is for my life. And so when that happened, I realized that there was a Bible school in Tampa, Florida that I was familiar with that I wanted to go study ministry and just see what this was about, because it was all rooted in, the Bible. It was all rooted in the Word of God. So I went there, ended up meeting my wife there, and she's from Oklahoma. And whenever I was, courting her, I basically, made a deal with God. I basically was praying and just said, okay, my home is Cincinnati. And so if this is really the girl that you have for me, then I need you to convince her to love Cincinnati, because I'm not going to force it on her, right? You can't force Skyline Chili on somebody. You can't force the Bengals on somebody. They've got to have like the desire. They got to have the inception on the inside of them, right? Yeah. So we came up for a wedding when we were dating, and she looks at me and says, you know what? I think this is where we need to actually live and raise our family. And that, for me, I was looking up at God. I was like, yes, yes, So that was a victory for me. But we were working on staff in Tampa, Florida. And what happened was that my pastor in Florida actually got arrested for having church during COVID. So this was a big part of our story, is that we always felt like the time was going to come where we were going to come back to Cincinnati because we loved it. We were always visiting. But when COVID happened, they were trying to shut churches down. And my pastor was trying to do everything he could to be compliant, but we fed over 1,000 families a week. We were seeing people experience so much growth and change in our services. And so it was a major, major ministry in the city. And the local government of Hillsborough County was trying to shut us down. And so from behind the scenes, I saw that, a helicopter shows up at my pastor's house and they arrest him just for having a Sunday morning service. And he 3 days later, the charges were dropped because of the Constitution, but they were trying to make an example out of him. Well, behind the scenes, I saw drones outside my wife's office trying to figure out if people were going to be in the building or not. I was over the media and the marketing over this church. We had to go through 80,000 comments. Many of them were death threats and people that were just saying that we hope everybody in your church dies of COVID because of what you're doing. Whoa. But behind the scenes, we were just trying to impact lives, right? And so when that happened, it just became a little bit more real for me. And so I just knew we had to start a church in my hometown, because I saw some of the craziest things happening even downtown for here as well. Churches trying to be shut down, ministries trying to be shut down, suicide rates were going up, just all sorts of things were happening. And this was my heart. And so I just looked at my pastor and I said, your example has just kind of showed me we've got to start our church right now in Cincinnati. So we started the River Church Cincinnati in the middle of COVID lockdown, in the middle of all these mandates. And within the first month, we had been providing groceries and meals to people and impacting people in the downtown area. Well, it just so happens that we ended up in the West End, because that was the only area to where we saw an opening for a building, but also for the communities that were hurting the most. So we just came right here on ground zero. I was tired of churches and people saying that they're going to impact the city, but they're on the outskirts of it. Yeah. So we came right downtown. 2 years later, we started the coffee shop because I have the business background, and I saw, like I said, that's that inward compass of just knowing we have to impact people. And so having the church has been one of the greatest joys of my life, to be able to, teach on Sunday mornings the Word of God that helps people through their week, but then also through community outreach.
I love it. Are you going to stay pastor of your church if you become mayor?
Yeah, and so we have to delegate it in a way to where it doesn't affect the responsibilities of being mayor. Yeah. And so what I see it as is that this has always been a part of the vision anyway, to impact lives. And so when we first started this race, me and my wife got together and kind of planned strategically on how we were going to delegate the administrative side of things and the pastoring, so that people just aren't left out to dry. But for the most part, we will still have a deep connection with our church. We will still be pastors. And then through that, I tell people that, our church services on Sunday are not a political campaign. This is for us. That's why I haven't allowed media in on Sunday mornings, is just because this is for the people that are in that building. and that won't change if we get elected.
I love it. Well, this has been amazing, Cory. What I'm allowing each of you guys to do is you can have a minute or two. You can talk directly to the people.
Okay.
And if there's anything that you want to say, any call to action, anything like that, this is your time. Feel free to do it. That's your camera right there.
Okay. Well, when do you guys think that you'll be?
We'll be launching this next week.
Okay.
Middle of next week. So
if you're
right before May 6th.
Okay. So if you're watching or listening to this before May 6th, you need to get out and vote. All right. This is historically low attended elections, is these primaries in these local city elections. And so we have a primary. You need to get to either a polling station on May 6th, or you can do early voting anywhere at the Hamilton County Board of Elections anytime before May 6th. But get out and vote. If you want to get connected with what we're doing, you can go to CoryBowman.com. That's Cory without an E. That's CoryBowman.com. And you can see all the information there on our events, on how you can get involved, how you can financially contribute to it. But that's at CoryBowman.com. And then if you're watching this after May 6th, we are going to be going into a general election, getting past the primary. We're going to be getting past the primary and going into a general election on November 4th. And so get out and vote for that as well. But if you're in Cincinnati, just hear my heart with this, is that this is a heart for downtown Cincinnati. This is a heart for all the 52 neighborhoods of Cincinnati. I believe that we are at a time to where we can see significant growth, and we can see a significant increase, not only in our population, but in our businesses and in our community over the next 10, 20, and 30 years. But it has to start somewhere. And I believe that this can start with this election. So I would be honored for you to be a part of what we're doing.
Awesome. Cory, that was amazing. Thank you so much for spending the time here today.
Yeah.
I think people know you a lot better as a human after this. So thank you
hope so.
for doing this. And we're rooting you on during the election.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to the Cincinnati Business Podcast. If you like the show, the best way to support us is to like, comment, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you fantastic content just like this. And if you are a greater Cincinnati-based business owner who has something you want to share with the world, reach out to me at brian@cincinnatipodcaststudio.com.